Miss Ada Fenwick had been at Wrenfield Hall 4 days before she noticed there was no photograph, no glove, no single trace that the child she taught had ever had a mother. She did not remark on it. That was not her way. She simply watched. And what she watched was a 7-year-old girl who flinched whenever the word came near the table. Mama. The word would rise in the room like a drought under a door, and the child would go still, and then she would go silent. The housekeeper made the rule plain on the 5th day. We do not speak of the late Mrs. Marsh in this house, Miss Fenwick. The master's wishes. 14 months since the funeral. 11 servants, every one of them trained to change the subject. The child had not said her mother's name aloud in all that time, so Ada set out 2 cups, one for herself, one for the mother nobody would name. A quiet way to make the woman sayable without asking a soul to speak. Ada drank hers. The second she left full, and by noon it was empty. She assumed a servant had tidied it. It was not a servant. If you have ever quietly made room for someone else's grief and were never once thanked for it, this story is for you. Before we go on, if these stories mean something to you, subscribe and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I like to see how far a quiet story can travel. Now, back to Wrenfield Hall. The house sat 2 miles out from the village of Nettlebrook, in the low green folds of Shropshire, where the hills come down soft and the light stays grey most of the year. It was a large house. That was the first thing you saw. The second thing you saw, if you had any eye at all, was that it was too tidy. Ada had that eye. 5 posts behind her had given it to her. She had come up the drive on foot from the coaching inn, her one trunk sent ahead. She had stood in the hall while a footman took her cloak, and she had counted, without meaning to, the ways the house held itself. The clocks were wound, the floors gave back the window like water. There was not a thing out of place, and that was the trouble. A house where a child lives is never quite in order. There is a doll under a chair, a spill somebody missed, a scuff on the stair where small boots go up 2 at a time. Wrenfield had none of it. Wrenfield had been cleaned the way a wound is cleaned, down to the raw. She was 34, plain, and she knew it, and had made her peace with it long ago. She had no family, no fortune, no reference to spare if this post went the way the last one nearly had. She had been engaged on trial terms, a month to prove herself, and Mrs. Vane, the master's sister, had said the words trial terms twice in the same breath, in case Ada had missed them the first time. Ada had not missed them. Ada missed very little. What she was good at, the one true thing she could do, was draw a frightened child back into the world. She had done it before. A boy in Kent who would not speak above a whisper, a pair of sisters in Bath who had watched their mother buried and then refused to be parted for a year, sleeping in one narrow bed. Ada had a patience that looked, from the outside, like doing nothing at all. It was not nothing. It was the hardest work she knew, and here was a child who needed it. Beatrice Marsh, B, though nobody at Wrenfield called her that. 7 years old, bright as a new pin, and watchful in a way that made Ida's chest ache the first time she caught it. The child watched adults the way a small animal watches a large one. Not with fear exactly, with calculation. She was forever measuring the temperature of a room. She had learned that some things, said aloud, made the grown people leave. On Ada's second morning at the schoolroom table, Bea had begun a sentence and stopped it. When I was small, and then nothing. The word had come to the edge of her, and she had swallowed it back down like something hot. She had looked at Ada quickly, to see the damage, and Ada had simply passed her the bread and butter and said, "When you were small." "Go on, I was small once too. It seems impossible, I know." The child had laughed, a small, surprised sound, but she had not finished the sentence. She had learned better than to finish that sentence. Ada thought about that laugh for a long time afterward. She thought about it that night, lying in the narrow governess's bed with the candle out. A child who could laugh but could not say mama. A house scrubbed clean of a woman who had died only 14 months back. She turned it over the way you turn a stone to see what lives beneath. The next day she went looking for crockery. The schoolroom had come with plain white things, thick and chipless, the sort of ware that survives children. But Ada wanted, for reasons she could not quite have named, one pretty cup. Something to make the morning table feel less like a nursery ward and more like a place a person might want to sit. She asked Mrs. Osgood and Mrs. Osgood, with the flat courtesy of a woman who does not intend to lift a finger, said the removed things were crated in the old still room, and Miss Fenwick might take whatever plain piece she liked, so long as it was plain. The crate was bound for the auctioneer. Ada saw that at once. There was a card tied to the handle, Bishop's Aldery, and a date. She knew what that meant, the way servants and governesses always know the things they are not told. The house was selling. Quietly, room by room, the small good things were going out the back to raise money against some debt nobody named at dinner. It was in the tidiness, too, she thought. A house braced for the bailiff keeps itself very straight. She lifted the straw, silver that would go first. A clock, some china wrapped in old newspaper, and there, near the top, half out of its paper, a teacup. It was blue and white. Spode, she thought, though she was no expert. A pattern of little bridges and willows, the blue gone soft with washing. And the rim was chipped, a small bite out of the edge, old, the china worn smooth around the wound, where 100 careful lips had learned to drink around it. It was prettier than anything else in the crate. And it was flawed, which was the very reason it would fetch nothing at Bishop's Aldery, and the very reason Ada wanted it. A perfect thing belongs to nobody. A mended, minded, chipped thing has been loved. She took it. She thought nothing of it. She wrapped it in her handkerchief and carried it up to the schoolroom and washed it in the ewer and set it to dry on the sill, and that, she believed, was the end of the matter. She did not know whose cup it was. Hold on to that. She did not know. The next morning she set 2 places, her own cup, and the blue one, full. She poured the second as she poured her own, tea drawn dark, a little milk, and she set it at the empty place across from the child, and when Bea looked at it, and then looked at her with the whole question sitting in her small face, Ada said it lightly, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. That one's for whoever we're thinking of this morning. She buttered her bread. You don't have to tell me who. I won't ask. I only think it's rude to think of a person and not offer them tea. The child said nothing, but she looked at the full cup for a long moment, and she did not go silent the way she went silent. She sat with it. She let it be there. That was all Ada had wanted. Not a name spoken, just a place laid so that the child could see plain as a plate that a person could be thought of at this table and the roof would not fall in. They ate. The lesson followed. And when Ada rose to fetch the copybooks, the second cup stood full and dark, untouched, exactly where she had left it. By noon, it was empty. She noticed it the way you notice a thing your eye has already filed as ordinary, empty cup. A housemaid, she thought, tidying, she rinsed it herself and set it back on the sill and thought no more of it, and if she had thought no more of it, this would be a very short story. But Ada was Ada. Ada missed very little. Mrs. Osgood came to her that afternoon. The housekeeper had 30 years in the family's service, and she wore them like a chain of office. She was not unkind. Ada wanted to be fair about that, even later, even after everything. Mrs. Osgood was not cruel. She was loyal, and she had confused the shape of her loyalty for the thing itself, and that is a different fault. Miss Fenwick. She stood in the schoolroom doorway and did not come in. I am told you have taken to laying 2 places at the child's breakfast. I have. For whom? for no one in particular. Ada kept her hands folded. It is a small exercise. It helps a shy child feel the table is a friendly place. I have used it before. It is not the place of a governess to alter the running of the rooms. The words were smooth, rehearsed perhaps, on the stairs coming up. The master keeps this house a certain way and has his reasons, and it is not for you or for me to improve upon them. I would take it kindly if you set one place, as is proper. Ada looked at her. She could have argued. She had the arguments, but she had learned, across 5 posts, that a governess who argues loses, and a governess who simply continues sometimes wins. "Thank you for telling me the master's wishes so plainly," Ada said. "I do understand them," which was not agreement. Mrs. Osgood, no fool, heard that it was not agreement. Something passed across the older woman's face, quick as a cloud. Then she inclined her head and went, and her keys spoke down the corridor for a long while after she was out of sight. The next morning Ada set 2 places. She was not a defiant woman by nature. She wants that understood. She did not do it to win. She did it because she had watched the child sit with a full cup and not go to stone, and she was not willing to take that small mercy away from a 7-year-old to soothe a housekeeper's sense of order. That was the whole of it. She would have said so to anyone who asked. Nobody asked. They only watched. Days went by like this. A week. The 2 cups, every morning. Her own, drained, the blue one, full at breakfast, empty by noon. And the child, by slow degrees, uncoiling, B.A. began to leave the 2nd cup a small nod when she sat down, the way you might nod to someone already at the table. She never said the name. But she made room for it. That was Ida's whole craft, that room-making, and she watched it work and was quietly, privately glad. Then came the morning the adults saw. Mrs. Vane called. The master's sister, up from her own house across the county, arrived without notice on estate business and asked to see the child, and was brought up to the schoolroom at the exact wrong hour. The breakfast things were still out. The 2 cups sat plain on the cloth. Her own, used, the blue one, full, Mrs. Vane saw them at once. Mrs. Osgood, at her shoulder, saw them too, and Ada watched the housekeeper's face close like a shop at dusk. 2 cups, said Mrs. Vane. She had a way of stating a thing as if she had caught it in a crime. Miss Fenwick, do you take breakfast in company? No, ma'am. Then who, and here her eyes went to the blue cup and stayed there, is the 2nd for? The room held its breath. Ada felt the child go still beside her, felt the small body brace for the door to open, for the adults to leave, for the subject to be swept off the table like crumbs. 14 months the child had been taught that this was what happened, that she was the reason rooms emptied. And Mrs. Osgood, quick meaning to save them all a scene, said the covering thing. A foolishness, ma'am, a habit of the schoolroom, it will be corrected. It is not a foolishness. Ada had not meant to say it so plainly, but she had heard the flinch go through the child at foolishness, and something in her would not have it. She set down the copybook. She spoke without heat and without apology, one plain sentence, the way you set a stone down where it is meant to go. I lay a 2nd place, so that a child in this house may think of her mother at her own breakfast table without being made to feel she has done something wrong. Nobody spoke. The clock on the schoolroom shelf went on with its small work. Mrs. Vane's mouth had opened and then thought better of itself. Mrs. Osgood had gone the colour of ash, and B, 7 years old, was looking up at Ada with an expression Ada would carry to her grave. It was not gladness. It was too big for gladness. It was a child hearing, for the first time in over a year, that the missing was allowed. The master's wishes Mrs. Osgood managed. Lo, I have heard them, Ada said. I honour a great many of them. Not this one. Mrs. Vane recovered herself. She was a woman who did not lose the last word for long. We shall see what my brother says, she said, when he is told, and she gathered her skirts and her housekeeper and went down, and the two of them talked in the hall in the low, urgent voices of people arranging a person's dismissal, and Ada heard just enough of it through the floor to know that her month on trial had grown a good deal thinner by dinner. She should have been afraid. She was, a little, in the practical part of her that counted shillings and knew what a governess without a character was worth on the open road, which was nothing. But the larger part of her sat with the child through the afternoon and taught her a French verb and did not let her see that anything at all had happened. And the blue cup, that morning, was empty by noon like all the others. That was the thing Ada could not let go of. Now that the fear had sharpened her, she turned back to it, the small ordinary thing she had filed and forgotten. Who emptied the cup? She had assumed a maid. But a maid tidying would take the cup away to wash it, or leave it and its dregs for the tray. This cup was not taken away. It was left in its place, on the cloth, drained clean, and set down again slightly wrong, the handle turned a quarter from where Ada always squared it, as if a hand had lifted it, and drunk, and set it back, and meant to leave no sign, and had left the one sign a tidy person cannot help leaving. The small wrongness of a thing put back by someone who was not the one who arranged it. She began, quietly, to watch the hours, and here she learned the piece that turned grief management into something closer to a hunt. She mentioned the cup to one of the housemaids, lightly, as if in thanks. "You needn't trouble with the schoolroom things before the tray at noon. I clear them myself." And the girl looked at her, honestly puzzled, and said, "Oh, we're none of us to go up before 2. Mrs. Osgood's own order, this year past. She has the schoolroom done in the afternoon, particular before 2. Mrs. Osgood's standing order, no servant in the schoolroom before 2 o'clock, and it had been so for a year and more." Ada stood with that a moment and felt the floor of the thing shift under her. The cup was full at breakfast, the cup was empty by noon, and between the breakfast and the noon, by the housekeeper's own iron rule, not one servant of the 11 set foot in the room. She counted back. She was a woman who counted. She had laid the second cup, she reckoned, for a little over 5 weeks now. 5 weeks of a full cup gone empty before noon in a room no servant entered. 5 weeks of a hand she had never seen, lifting the blue cup, drinking, and setting it down a quarter turn wrong. It was not a servant. She did not, at first, let herself finish the thought. There was a foolish, cold, thrilling part of her that whispered the word, "A house like this teaches you to whisper." Ghost, a grieving house, a scrubbed-out woman, a cup that emptied itself. She was too sensible for it, and she felt the pull of it anyway, in the grey Shropshire mornings with the mist on the glass. But Ada did not believe in a ghost that left the handle turned. A ghost has no thirst. A ghost does not take milk. Whatever drank from that cup was warm, and living, and careful, and came at an hour when the house had, by careful arrangement, made certain no one would be there to see. Someone had made certain no one would be there to see. That was the piece that stopped her breath. The rule was not idle. No servant before 2. It had been laid down a year past, near enough to the funeral to be of the funeral. A rule to keep one room empty at a certain hour, every day, so that one person could go into it unwitnessed. And into that arranged emptiness Ada had walked, 4 weeks a stranger, and set out a full cup, and never once thought to ask who was drinking it. She began to notice more, now that she knew to look. The pot, some mornings, when she came back up before her lesson, was warmer than she had left it, as if it had been moved near the fire and set back. The second chair, more than once, stood a quarter turned toward the hearth, angled the way a person turns a chair to sit and be warm, though Ada always left it square to the table. Small things. The signature of a careful visitor who did not know he was being read. And a visitor it was. She had stopped, by now, thinking a maid. She had stopped by now thinking anything but the one thing the arranged hour and the standing order and the forbidden room all pointed at, though she would not let the name of him form fully, until she had seen it with her own eyes. For 4 days she left the cups and went out and came back to find the second empty, and told herself she would not stay, she would not spy, it was not her business who grieved in an empty room. She told herself that on the Monday, she told herself that on the Tuesday, by Wednesday she had stopped believing it. Because it was her business. That was the thing. She had laid the cup. Whatever hand was lifting it, she had put the thing into its reach. She had meant it for the child. She had meant it, from the first morning, entirely for the child, a small kindness scaled to a 7-year-old's grief, and somewhere in the house it had been caught by a larger grief she had never accounted for, and was doing work she had never designed, and she could not, being who she was, leave a thing she had set in motion running on in the dark unseen. On the Thursday morning she set the 2 cups as she always did, her own and the blue one full. She sat with the child through breakfast. She heard B, for the first time, murmur something at the second cup as she left the table. Not a name, still only, softly, "There's yours." 2 words to an empty chair, and the child said them without flinching, without looking to see who would leave, and went off to fetch her slate as if it were nothing at all. Ada sat very still after the door closed. 5 weeks of patient work, and there it was. "There's yours." The child had made her mother a person at the table again. Ada had done the thing she was good at, the one true thing, and no one would ever thank her for it, and she did not need thanking. She only needed to know she had not built it on sand. The clock said 10:30. She did not clear the cups. Every morning of her life at Wrenfield she had cleared that table, or left it for the tray, and gone about the day, and let the room stand empty for whatever came at 11. Every morning she had made herself absent from the hour that had been arranged for someone's solitude. Today she did not. Today she took up her sewing, and she carried the low chair to the window seat into the deep grey light half behind the curtain, where a person coming through the door would not at once see her. And she sat, and she waited. It was not a small thing she did, and she knew it was not. She knew what it would cost if she was wrong, and worse if she was right. A governess on trial terms, already reported to the master's sister, already marked by the housekeeper, sitting hidden in a forbidden room to catch its secret at its most naked hour. There was no version of it that looked innocent from the outside. If she was found there, whatever she saw, she would be gone by nightfall and gone without a character, and no house in England would take her after. She turned the needle in the cloth and did not sew a single stitch. Her hands had gone quite cold. She had half known this risk from the moment she decided to stay. That was the truth of it. She was not surprised into it. She had chosen it, with her eyes open, in the grey light, because there are things a decent person cannot leave unlooked at once she has begun them. The house was very quiet. Below, a door. A dog somewhere in the yard. The small settling of an old place around its own bones. The fire ticked. The 2 cups stood on the cloth, her own drained, the blue one full and dark and waiting, and Ada watched the door and listened to the corridor with every nerve she had. The clock ground toward 11. And at 11, exactly, when the church bell 2 miles off at Nettlebrook came thin across the fields to say the hour, Ada heard, on the schoolroom stair, a man's slow tread. Coming up. Coming, without hurry and without a candle, to the one room in his own house that no one had seen him enter in 14 months. The footsteps stopped outside the door. There was a long pause, the pause of a man gathering himself at a threshold he has to cross alone. Then the latch lifted, and the door began, quietly, to open. The door opened, and a man came into the room. He was tall, and stooped a little at the shoulder, the way a tall man stoops who has spent a year making himself smaller. He wore no coat. His shirt was open at the throat. And he stopped, 1 step past the threshold, when he saw her. For a moment Neither of them moved. The fire ticked. The blue cup stood full on the cloth, and Ada, in the window seat with her cold needle in her hand, looked up at the master of Wrenfield Hall and saw a man who had come to be alone and found he was not. She rose. She did not know what else to do. "Sir," she said. He said nothing. His eyes went from her to the table, to the two cups, to the chair turned a quarter toward the fire, and something moved across his face that she had no name for, though she had seen grief before, and this was near it. "I'll go," she said. "Forgive me. I'll go at once." "No," it came quick and low. Then, quieter. "No, please. Don't." He crossed to the table. He moved like a man in someone else's house. He looked down at the cup a long moment, and then he reached out and closed his hand around it and lifted it, and Ada saw the way his fingers found the chip in the rim without looking, the way a hand finds a thing it has held 10,000 times. She knew then, all at once she knew. The cup was not just a pretty cup from a crate. The cup was hers. Clara's. The one thing of the woman's that had not gone to the auctioneer, because Ada had taken it for the schoolroom, thinking nothing, thinking only that it was prettier than the rest. He drank. He drank standing, with his eyes shut, and when he set the cup down his hand was not quite steady. "It's drawn," Ada said, because she had to say something, and there was nothing else in the world she could say. "The pot. If you'll have more. Thank you." His voice had gone rough. "Yes, thank you." She poured. Her own hand was not steady either. He took sugar, 1 spoon, and she had somehow known that too, from 5 weeks of a cup left cleaner some mornings than others. They stood on either side of a child's breakfast table, a governess and the master who paid her, and they talked of tea. Whether it was too strong. Whether the mornings had turned cold, small words, laid down carefully, one at a time, like stones across a flood. Underneath, neither of them said the thing, but it stood in the room with them, plain as the cup. He had been coming here at 11 for 5 weeks, to the one door he could not open in front of anyone, to drink, alone, from his dead wife's cup, because for the first time since the funeral, somebody had set it out. He did not stay long. He set the cup down, and he thanked her again, and at the door he paused with his hand on the latch. He turned it a quarter, and stopped, and Ada watched him set it back exactly a quarter wrong, the way it had always been, the small habit of a man who did not want a mark left of where he had been. "You needn't clear the second cup," he said, not looking at her. "In the mornings, if it's no trouble." "It's no trouble, sir." He went. His slow tread went back down the stair, and Ada sat down in the window seat and found she was shaking, and did not, for a long while, know whether it was fear or something else entirely. He came again the next morning. And the next. Nothing in the house changed. That was the strangest part of it. Below stairs the order held. Mrs. Osgood ran the place to the minute. The 11 servants moved through their day as they always had, and at 11 o'clock the master of Wrenfield climbed a stair he was not supposed to climb, and behind the schoolroom door a small and secret warmth grew that no one in the house suspected. Ada learned to have the pot drawn by the hour. She did not plan it. It simply happened, the way kindness happens, one morning at a time. The second chair stayed turned toward the fire. He sat in it now. The first day he only stood, the second he sat, the third he stayed past the tea and talked, and she understood that a thing was thawing that had been frozen a long time. They spoke of nothing that mattered, and everything did. The weather, the state of the roads, a book she had given B. And then, one grey morning, he said a name he had not said in that house in 14 months. Clara chose this room for the schoolroom, he said. He was looking at the window. She said it caught the best of the morning. She was right. She usually was. He said it, and the room did not fall in. Ada made no great thing of it. She only nodded and poured and said, It is a good light for a child to learn in. And he looked at her with a kind of astonishment, as though he had dropped something breakable, and it had not broken. Another morning he asked her a question. It cost him, she saw it cost him. Is she, Beatrice, is she happy? Can you tell? I find I can't always tell. He turned the cup in his hands. I have not known how to ask her. I have not known how to ask anyone. She is better than she was, Ada said. She is a bright child, sir, and a watchful one. She has been carrying something too heavy for her. We are setting it down, a little at a time. He was quiet. For 14 months, he said at last, this house has been very kind to me. Everyone in it. They have been so careful. They have kept every sharp thing away from me. He looked up. You are the first person in it who let me be sad. Ada did not answer that. There was no answer to it. She only refilled his cup, and the church bell 2 miles off struck the half-hour, and it was for a little while enough, but a house has ears, and a housekeeper has eyes, and 30 years of service teaches a woman to count the master's footsteps. Mrs. Osgood had marked the daily climb. She had marked the closed door, and the governess alone behind it, and the master come down each morning with something eased in his face that she did not trust. She did not speak to Ida. She went, instead, in her black dress with her keys at her belt, and she wrote to Mrs. Vane. Mrs. Vane came within the week. She did not come to the schoolroom. She sent for Ada to the cold morning room, and she stood by the window with her gloves still on, and she looked at Ada as a woman looks at a stain. You lay 2 cups at my niece's breakfast, Mrs. Vane said. I am told you have done so for some weeks, against Mrs. Osgood's word, against my brother's stated wish. I do, ma'am. And I am told my brother now visits the schoolroom, daily alone at an hour when the child is at her lessons, and you are the only grown woman in the room. Mrs. Vane's voice was very even. You are a governess on trial terms, Miss Fenwick. You have no family and no fortune, and, I understand, no post to go to if you leave this one. You will understand how such a thing appears. A woman in your position, alone with a grieving man of property behind a shut door. There is a word for a woman who angles so far above her station. I will not use it in this room. But you know it. I know it, ma'am. My brother is not himself. He has not been himself in over a year. He is in no state to see when he is being managed. Mrs. Vane drew on her gloves, though they were already on, a small tugging gesture. There is an arrangement in hand, a sensible one. Mrs. Harcourt of Ashcote is a widow of means and a good woman, and her fortune would clear what this estate owes before it falls due. £4,000, Miss Fenwick, to a county bank, inside 3 months. Do you understand what that means? It means this family has no room for sentiment, and no room at all for a governess who has forgotten hers. Ada stood very straight and said nothing, because there was nothing she could say that would not sound like the very thing she was accused of. You will stop laying the second cup, Mrs. Vane said. You will keep to your hours and your station. Or you will be dismissed without a character, and I will see to it myself that the reason is known. She went to the door. I think we understand each other. That evening Ada wrote out her resignation in a plain hand and carried it to the master's study and knocked. He was standing when she came in. He could never, she had noticed, sit in his own study of an evening. He stood by the cold hearth like a man waiting for a train. She laid the letter on the desk between them. I am giving my notice, sir, she said. It is better. For the child. For the house. There is talk, and talk touches Beatrice, and I will not be the cause of that. I will go at the month's end, or sooner, as you wish. I ask only that you let the second cup stand until I go. For her, not for me. He looked at the letter and did not touch it. My sister, he said. It does not matter who, sir. It matters to me. He came round the desk. Miss Fenwick, Ada, there is something you don't know, and I find I cannot let you walk out of this house without knowing it, whatever comes of it." He stopped. His jaw worked. I have never said it to a living soul. She waited. She had learned, these 5 weeks, the value of waiting. "The night my wife died," he said, "I was in London." He said it flat, the way a man lays down a weight he cannot carry another step. She had been ill, but the doctors said weeks. They said there was time. They said go. This estate was already sinking. The debt you heard my sister name, it did not begin this year. I went up to London to raise money against it, to save the roof over her head and my daughter's. I sat in a bank's front room, Miss Fenwick, on the night my wife died, arguing over a rate of interest, and she asked for me, at the end, and I was 200 miles away, saving a house. The fire had gone out. Neither of them moved to light it. When I came back, he went on, I could not walk through this house. Everything in it was her. Her work basket, her glove on the hall table where she'd left it, her cup, and every one of those things said the same word to me. Coward, so I had them taken away. All of it. I told myself I was sparing the child. I was sparing myself. I could not live in a house that was full of proof that I had chosen the money over her last hours. He looked at Ada, and his eyes were wet and did not care. And then a governess I did not want to hire set out that cup on a schoolroom table, and I found I could go into the one room where she used to sit and hold the one thing of hers I hadn't managed to destroy, and be for half an hour at 11 o'clock with my wife. You gave me that. Without knowing it. So do not stand there and tell me you are nothing but a governess overstepping her place. For a long moment Ada said nothing at all. Then she picked her words the way she picked stitches, one true one at a time. "I did not set that cup out for you, sir." Her voice was quite steady now. "I set it out so your daughter would be allowed to know she had a mother. That you needed it too is not a thing either of us did on purpose." She met his eyes. "Which is the only reason I trust it. If I had set it out to catch you, it would be exactly the low thing your sister names. I did not. I set it out for a 7-year-old who cannot say the word mama without the room emptying of every grown person in it. That she has been taught, by kindness, that her own mother is a shameful thing." She drew a breath. "You may keep me or turn me off, sir, but do not let them take the second cup from her. Whatever else. Not that." He did not turn her off. He picked up the letter and folded it once and put it in the fire that was not lit, which was as good as burning it. "Stay," he said. "Only stay. Let me put this right." The morning it came right began like any other. Grey light. The pot drawn. 2 places at the schoolroom table, and this time a third, for the master had asked, quietly, if he might take his tea there of a morning with his daughter, and Ada had said that he might, and had watched Bee's face when her father sat down at the child's table as though it were the most natural thing in the world. The blue cup stood between them. Bee was quiet a long while. She ate her bread. She watched her father drink from the chipped cup, and she watched Ada, and she watched the door, the way she always watched the door, waiting for the moment the grown-ups would stop her. Then she put down her spoon. "Mama's cup has a chip in it," she said. The room did not empty. No one changed the subject. Ada kept perfectly still and did not so much as turn her head. "She dropped it," Bea said, in the small plain voice of a child reciting a thing she has kept safe a long time. "The day I was born. Papa says she dropped it because she was so glad. And it chipped. And she kept it anyway. She said a chipped cup that you love is worth more than a whole one you don't." She looked up, at last, straight at her father. "Isn't that right, Papa?" Edmund Marsh set down the cup. When he spoke his voice was steady, and Ada would love him for the rest of her life for how hard that steadiness had been to find. "That's right," he said. "That's exactly right. That's just what she said. And B smiled, a whole smile, the first Ada had seen reach the child's eyes, and went back to her bread, as though a door that had been shut for 14 months had simply opened, and the room beyond it was ordinary, and warm, and hers. Ada looked at the window so that neither of them would see her face. The matter of the marriage was settled a fortnight later in the drawing-room before the assembled propriety of the county. Mrs. Vane had arranged it like a court. Mrs. Harcourt sat by the fire, brisk and handsome and not unkind, a widow who knew exactly what she was there to do and meant to do it with dignity. The lawyer had his papers. The debt to Aldermore and Pike stood £4,000 and 90 days off, and a signature would sink it in an afternoon. It was, everyone agreed, the sensible thing. Edmund came into the room. Ada was not there. She was above stairs with the child, where a governess belonged. But the whole house heard of it after, from the parlour-maid who carried in the tray, and Mrs. Osgood, who stood at the back, and never in her 30 years told a tale out of that room but this one. He did not sit down among them. He crossed the room, past his sister, past the lawyer's papers, and he stopped near the door that gave on to the schoolroom stair, and he stood there so that they all had to turn to see him. "I am grateful to you all," he said, "more than I can say. You have tried to save this house, and I have let you believe I would let you do it in this way. I cannot. I will not marry to clear a debt." Mrs. Vane began to speak. He raised his hand, and she stopped. "The debt is mine," he said. "It began the night I left my wife dying to go and argue over it in London. I will pay it the way it should be paid. I am selling the London interest, the thing I went north to save, the thing I chose over her. Aldermore and Pike will take an arrangement over 5 years against it, and I have their word this morning. It will cost me the last of what I was so proud of keeping." "Good, let it. I should have let it go long ago, and kept the other thing." He looked round at them. "This house was not saved by money. It has already been saved. By a woman none of you thought worth a second glance. A governess on trial terms who set out a second cup at a child's breakfast, and gave me back my daughter, and gave me back my wife's memory, in a single act she did not even do for me. Her name is Ada Fenwick, and I will not have her spoken of in this house as anything less than the person who brought it back to life." There was a silence in the room like the silence after a bell. Mrs. Vane was the first to move, and she did not move quickly. She sat very still, and Ada, who came to know her a little in the years after, understood that behind that stillness a hard and sensible woman was doing sums of a different kind, and finding the old sums wrong. She said, "At last only, you had better be certain, Edmund," and he said he was. And that was all she said that day, though she said more, and warmer, in time. Mrs. Harcourt rose from her place by the fire. She drew on her gloves without haste, and she was not a woman who had been humiliated because she did not permit it. She crossed to Edmund and gave him her hand. "You were always a poor prospect, Mrs. Marsh," she said, dry as autumn. "A man in love with a dead woman makes a cold husband. I am glad to hear he has finally decided to be a warm one instead, to whoever the fortunate party turns out to be. A ghost of a smile. Do settle with the bank. I shan't lend you a penny." And she took her leave and went out to her carriage with her head high, and Ada always thought better of the whole county for the grace of it. Mrs. Osgood was the last. She did not yield in that room. She was too old and too proud, and had guarded the wrong gate too long to lay it down in an afternoon. She went back below stairs, and she ran the house to the minute as she always had, and for some days she and Ada passed on the stairs and said only what the day required. But one morning, a week on, Ada came into the schoolroom to lay the breakfast, and stopped. The 2 cups were already set. Her own, and the blue one, full and waiting, in its place turned a quarter toward the fire. Mrs. Osgood stood by the table with the empty tray against her hip. She did not look at Ada. She looked at the cup. "I ran this house the way he asked me to run it," she said. Her voice was not soft, it would never be soft. 14 months. I thought I was sparing him. I thought I was being loyal. She was quiet a moment. I was keeping a wound open and calling it order. I served this family 30 years, and I did not once think to ask the child what she wanted. She set down the tray. "You did, on your first week, a stranger." She turned to go, and at the door she stopped and said, without turning round, "The pot's drawn. I'll bring it up warm henceforth. It's no trouble." And went. It was not much. From Mrs. Osgood it was everything, and she set the second place herself, unasked, every morning after, for the rest of her days in that house. A year on, and more. The schoolroom still caught the best of the morning. Clara had been right about that. There were still 2 cups at the breakfast table, and most mornings 3, and no one below stairs thought it strange any longer, because it was simply how Wrenfield began its day. On the stair, halfway up, where the light was good, a portrait hung again, a young woman with a wide plain face and laughing eyes, and a blue cup, if you looked close, painted small upon the table at her elbow. B said good morning to it going down and good night to it coming up, the way a child says these things, without ceremony, the way you speak to someone who is simply there. The chipped blue cup lived at the table now, always. Some mornings B drank from it herself, her small hands careful of the rim. Some mornings it stood full, and no one drank from it, and that was allowed too. That was the whole of the thing, in the end, that it was allowed. Ada watched them from the window seat, the man and his daughter, in the grey good light, and thought that she had never in her life meant to be anything but useful. She had meant the cup for the child. She had never once meant it for him. And the accident of it, that in reaching to give a frightened 7-year-old her mother back, she had given the same gift to the girl's father, and been given something herself she had stopped believing she would ever be offered, was the truest thing that had ever happened to her. He came and stood beside her at the window. The child was talking to the portrait on the stair. "You're very far away this morning," he said. "I was thinking," Ada said, "that I came here for a month, on trial, and that no one ever did tell me whether I'd passed." He laughed, a real laugh, which she had not heard in the house her first weeks in it, and which lived there freely now. "You passed, Miss Fenwick," he said. "Ada," she said. "Ada," he turned the name over as though it was something he had been given to keep. "Then you must call me Edmund. It's only fair. A woman who has seen a man cry into his tea at 11 in the morning has earned his Christian name." "Edmund," she said, and it fit her mouth as though it had always been there. Below them, the child laughed at something the morning had shown her, and the light came in the good window, and there were 2 cups on the table, and one of them was chipped, and loved, and kept anyway. That is the whole of it. A plain woman, a stubborn small kindness, a cup nobody was supposed to set out. She never meant it for him. She meant it for the child. And the world she gave back its dead to began, that morning and every morning after, with room at the table for the people we are not allowed to miss. Tell me in the comments the name your own family stopped saying. Say it here. I would like to see how far it travels.